Welcome. So I'd like to throw my hat into the theory crafting ring and talk about something that's been on my mind for a while. It's about these old notes and concept art for Undertale Toby Fox posted on Twitter. I know these posts are like over 6 years old and completely old news, but they have some huge lore implications that no one seems to be talking about. I mean, I saw a Reddit post talking about it and a couple of Tumblr posts talking about it, but other than that, this particular topic is flying completely under the radar. But before we begin, I'd like to shout out PCL12, the author of the single Reddit post talking about this mystery, and To Sleep, Perchance to Dream, the author of another helpful Tumblr post. I use these pretty extensively in the research of this video, and I'll be stealing their conclusions. The links are in the description below. So all of these posts are pretty cool, but this one particularly piqued my interest. The Genesis of Papyrus, apparently. So at first glance, this post seems pretty unassuming. It's cool to see the early concept art of Papyrus, how he was meant to be called Times New Roman, how his bad spaghetti seems to have been a constant in his character, how he seems to have been conceptualized before Sans, and what is that? Why was this done? What could Toby Fox possibly be hiding? Okay, let's try to remain objective here and see if we can figure out what's being censored. Now you may be thinking right now, what? How exactly are you going to do that? But it actually wasn't that hard. And that's because there were a few segments of letters that were left unobscured. And because I have a very active social life, I decided to do a painstaking analysis of Toby Fox's handwriting to determine what letters these could be. Now, I admit, I am not a handwriting expert. In fact, handwriting analysis appears to be pseudoscience, but just for fun, here are some things I noticed. So let's read out the entire sentence first. Has a brother named Comic Sans and a blank named blank. Okay, here are some observations I have. Firstly, Toby Fox's handwriting is inconsistent. He writes between a weird mixture of cursive and print, but one thing that does remain fairly consistent are his lowercase a's. The tails of his lowercase a's are always connected to the next letter in the word. I will leave links to all the Twitter posts in the description below, and I encourage you to check my work, because I'm telling you, this is the most consistent part of his writing. He always does this. Now luckily for us, there is an A in this sentence, but conveniently there is a small box obscuring its tail, preventing us from seeing if this is a single A or if it's part of a bigger word. You could tell that when Toby had this in Photoshop, he decided that the big boxes weren't enough, that he needed to add another small box to obscure the A's tail. And let's think about why he did this. If it was a single A, that would tell us that the next word in the sentence starts with a consonant. If it was an, then that would tell us that the next word in the sentence started with a vowel. And because the sentence is talking about Papyrus's family members, it follows that the next word in the sentence is a family member title. There are only 2 family member titles that start with vowels, aunt and uncle, which obviously narrows things down too much, so to keep the mystery going and to be sneaky, he decided to add a box to obscure if this word is a or an. So I will consider both if the word is a or an. So let's talk about what the next part of this sentence definitely isn't. It's definitely not older brother, older sister, younger sister, none of that. The reason is because of a concept in grammar called parallelism, which states that the structure of a sentence should follow a predictable pattern. So if this word was something like older brother, it follows that the entire sentence should be something like has an older brother named Comic Sans and an older brother named blah blah blah. But that's not what's being said. The sentence would say has a brother named Comic Sans and an older brother named blah blah blah. It just sounds wrong. Now you may be thinking, this sentence already doesn't follow the rules of grammar and it's obvious he was just brainstorming, writing whatever came to mind. But if that was the case, when he decided that Papyrus should have an older brother, why didn't he go back and clarify if Sans was older or younger than him? We know that Toby Fox is a thorough writer who works out every little detail in his story, so we know if he was going to specify if Papyrus had a younger or older brother, he would do the same for Sans. So we will not be considering older/younger sibling. Alrighty then, so I compiled a list of all the family titles in the English language. Within reason. I mean, you could have like a 26th cousin, first removed, that's obviously not on the list. But let's get started. We know that this family member title is at least 2 words long. This is because if it was something like father or brother, there'd be too much of a gap between that word and named. So for that reason, all single word family titles will be removed from the list. I will, however, make an exception for granddaughter, just because it's so long. The next one I'm going to remove from the list is first cousin once removed because it's too long and very random. I highly doubt it's first cousin once removed. Okay, so now we're left with great-grandfather, great-grandmother, great-uncle, great-aunt, first cousin, second cousin, etc. And we're gonna have to use the power of handwriting analysis to eliminate things even further. So as you can see, the censor boxes don't obscure the top of this letter. Now as you can tell, the top of this letter forms a bit of a loop or an arc. Several of his letters do this, but two that do not are G and C. Since this is the first letter of the second word that we're looking for, we can eliminate great-grandfather, great-grandmother, first cousin, second cousin, third cousin, fourth cousin, etc. Now all we're left with is great-uncle, great-aunt, and granddaughter. Looking at Toby's A's, yes, they do have a curve at the top, but it's more of an upside-down V shape rather than a parabolic shape. So for that reason, we can eliminate great-aunt. Looking at the top of Toby's U's, they are almost always in a straight line, but I do have evidence of one U that kind of resembles the arc in question. So for that reason, I'm not going to eliminate great uncle yet, but it is highly dubious at this point. Looking at Toby's D's, they do consistently have a loop at their stem, but the problem is granddaughter doesn't make a ton of sense because Papyrus is not an old man. Even in these early concept arts, he's characterized as being young, so it doesn't really make any sense he would have any grandchildren. So from a logic perspective, I'm eliminating granddaughter. So now all we're left with is great uncle, which was already dubious from the start, so does that mean this whole exercise was pointless? No. That's because there's another Ashim we've been ignoring this whole time. Yeah, this word over here is probably another. Which means it logically follows that the next word is brother. Has a brother named Comic Sans and another brother named blah blah blah. Okay, so now we're left with two options, great uncle or brother. Can we narrow things down even further? Yes. Looking at the small segment of this letter, you can tell that it juts out in some way. Now, great uncle ends in E, and yes, the ends of Toby's E's do jut out a little, but not to this extent. However, brother ends in R, and the ends of Toby's cursive R's jut out quite a bit. But what about the B in brother? Does that line up with this segment over here? Absolutely. The stems of Toby's B's are either straight or curved, and some of them curve so extremely that it forms an arc. Just take a look at this one. Even a B that occurs earlier on in this sentence forms a bit of an arc. That being said, I'm going to eliminate great uncle, which leaves us with brother. Okay, so Papyrus was originally intended to have a second brother. Who cares? We know literally nothing about this character, and I couldn't even begin to possibly guess his name. It's Gaster. I know, it's basically a meme at this point. Everything mysterious that happens in these games is chalked up to Gaster. Redacted is Gaster, the knight is Gaster, the man behind the tree is Gaster, the narrator of the character select is Gaster. I mean, some of these definitely are Gaster, but not everything mysterious in these games are Gaster. But this situation is different. I still think I can ring these couple of pages of handwriting for all they're worth. Look at this. This could easily be the top of a T, and this could be the end of a cursive R. Filling in the blanks, we get W.D. Gaster. Because Gaster is the only character in these games that's associated with redactions or censorship. See HalfBreadChaos' video on Redacted for more information. When Toby agreed to release the official Undertale tarot cards, he replaced Gaster's card with Gerson's, almost like he was redacted. Gaster is the only character Toby Fox refuses to publicly acknowledge. Sure, he roleplays as him on Twitter, but other than that, he doesn't publicly acknowledge he exists. And of course he does this because he could accidentally confirm something about Gaster and ruin the mystery. Which is why when he wanted to share the first ever concept art and notes about Papyrus, he had to redact the Gastery bits. Now you may be thinking, why is it W.D. Gaster and not something like Wingdings or Wingdings Gaster? Because if this is the genesis of Papyrus, doesn't it follow that this is the genesis of Gaster? He wouldn't have decided to shorten his name from Wingdings Gaster to W.D. Gaster. And what I'm saying is, I disagree. I believe he came up with Gaster long before he came up with most of the Undertale or Deltarune characters. And this is because Gaster is clearly inspired by the Yume Nikki character Yuboa. We know that Toby Fox is a huge Yume Nikki fan, and that it influenced him greatly when he was creating Undertale. He's made many tribute songs about different Yume Nikki characters, and he's even interviewed the actual creator of Yume Nikki. That is peak fanboy. Yuboa is a mysterious character with almost nothing about him explained. It allows people to endlessly speculate about him, and it's one of the reasons Yume Nikki is so popular. Gaster is a character in which a lot of his backstory is not explained, and it allows people to endlessly speculate about him. I wouldn't say he's the primary reason Undertale became popular, but he's the reason that people still talk about Undertale 8 years after it's been released. The only way to encounter Yuboa is to repeatedly flip a switch on and off. Because you have to go out of your way to summon him, most players will not encounter him in their playthrough. Gaster couldn't be encountered at all in the first version of Undertale due to a bug in the code, but even after that bug was fixed, the circumstances in which you would learn about his existence or meet him were incredibly rare. It would involve you getting a specific fun value which is generated at the start of a save file, and even then, the chances of you encountering Gaster through normal gameplay are so slim that most players use a file editor to get the specific fun value needed to encounter him. I mean, just look at these two. Obviously, Gaster was inspired by Yuboa. This leads me to believe that Gaster is one of the first Undertale characters Toby created, which is why he's referred to as WD Gaster in his private notes instead of something like Wingdings Gaster or Wingdings. He's already had time to flesh out Gaster's character and come up with a name that he likes. So yeah, all the evidence supports the fact that Papyrus was originally intended to have two brothers, Comic Sans and WD Gaster. But the question is this still canon to Undertale? Because as you can see, there are many things in these notes that were eventually changed. Could this be another situation where something was left on the cutting room floor? Well, let's look at the facts. Despite looking like a horror movie monster, Gaster's appearance does resemble that of a skeleton. I mean, his skin is white like the bones of a skeleton, his black eyes could be eye sockets, he has a monochrome color palette like the talking portraits of the skeletons. He even has these little white dots in his eye sockets like Sans. There is a clear connection between Sans and Gaster. According to the game files, one of the weapons Sans uses in his boss battle are called Gaster Blasters. Gaster was the royal scientist, and Sans clearly has a background in science. With the machine in his workshop, his books on quantum physics, his ability to teleport, his unique writing style and some of the entries in the True Lab, and the possibility he's one of the people Gaster is talking to in Entry 17. When you go into Sans' workshop and interact with the blueprint, it says, "Blueprints. You can't read the symbols they're written in, almost like they're written in Wingdings." Both Papyrus and Sans are named after bad fonts, and I think we can all agree that Wingdings is a pretty shitty font. So I think there's some compelling evidence that it is still canon to Undertale that Gaster was Sans and Papyrus' brother. But that doesn't mean that my theory is foolproof. The biggest problem with this theory is that Sans and Papyrus don't mention this supposed third brother at all. Since Gaster was shattered across space and time, to them, he's basically dead, and yet they never talk about him. I mean, it's kind of in character for Sans not to talk about him, but why doesn't Papyrus talk about him? You can get pretty close to Papyrus in the pacifist route, and he would definitely mention if he had a dead brother. There are also no pictures of him in the house. And speaking from experience, even if a loved one died years ago, there will still be evidence of their existence in the house. You may be saying it's because Gaster was wiped from people's memories when he fell into his creation and was shattered across space and time. But that is never confirmed in-game. See Dorked's video on Gaster for more information. Honestly, I never understood people who believed in this theory because it doesn't make any sense. If he was truly wiped from people's memories, who did the monsters think made the core? Because it didn't make itself. Also, if they're brothers, did they live together? From all indication, this family is pretty tight-knit, so it would follow he did live with them. And if the notes in Sans' basement were written by him, that would also indicate that he lived with them in the house. But that can't be the case, because according to the shopkeeper in Snowdin, Sans and Papyrus moved to Snowdin one day and asserted themselves, but she doesn't mention any third brother. If Sans truly did work as a royal scientist, then maybe they all lived together in the core, and when Gaster was shattered across space and time, they took some of his old notes and moved to Snowdin. I guess that could possibly be the case, but then again, there would be mention of his existence, at least by Papyrus. The only reason I can think that neither Papyrus or Sans mention him is maybe they had a strained relationship with him, but at this point we're in full fanfiction territory. And all this confusion doesn't even account for the fact that Undertale, Sans, and Papyrus are likely from the Deltarune universe! Ugh, I need a brain break. This is the end of the video, but what do you guys think? Is Gaster the secret third skeleton brother? Or is all my evidence pseudoscience and confirmation bias? Leave your answers in the comments below.